Welcome to the July astrology forecast. I'm Rick Levine, and we are going to look at the month ahead from an astrological perspective. Before we jump into the material, there's a couple of announcements I would like to make. Actually, three. I'll keep it relatively short. The first is a reminder that ESAR 2022, ESAR is the International Society for Astrological Research. The ESAR 2022 conference is being held on August 25th through the 29th in Westminster, Colorado. It's going to be arguably the largest conference of the last couple of years and maybe the next couple of years. You can find information about it at ESAR 2022, esar2022.org. And this conference is going to feature over 100 speakers, lectures, pre-conference, post-conference workshops. There's going to be ethics training and consulting skills training for those who want it, extra, before the conference itself begins. There'll be a trade show, bookstore, social events, people from all over the world. This is an international organization, and there will be speakers there from literally around the world, and it will be a lot of fun. I'm doing a lecture, in the program itself on the future of astrology and the disintegration of the boundaries between physical and metaphysical reality. This is really a lecture about Saturn losing its potency in this day and age because of the outer planets that have been discovered in the last couple of centuries. I will also be doing a post-conference workshop on the role of the outer planets in chart interpretation and forecasting. The program is online. It's going to be an amazing conference. I will be there, obviously, and I look forward to seeing many of you. Next, I would like to talk briefly about the Astrology Gathering, being called TAG, the Astrology Gathering, at Lilydale. That's Lilydale, New York, a very interesting place. That's the home of the American Spiritualist Church. And this is going to be September 15 through 18. That's a Thursday through a Sunday. And it's about an hour southeast of Buffalo, kind of between Buffalo and the Finger Lakes region of New York. It's a beautiful area. This is the second year that this conference has been running. You can find information about it at The Astrology Gathering, all one word, theastrologygathering.com. And it's going to be a lot smaller than ESAR, but it's also going to be a very interesting group of speakers. You can find the entire schedule online at theastrologygathering.com. I'll be doing a talk during the conference, and I'll be doing a post-conference workshop, and that's all the information on that will be online at theastrologygathering.com. The other thing I want to mention, and this will come and go pretty quickly, is that the Friends of Astrology, which is a Chicago-based group, normally holds their winter and summer workshops in Chicago. But because of COVID, it's being held online, which means that this is open to anyone, anywhere in the world. And this particular workshop this year, the summer webinar, is going to be on Saturday, July 16, and that'll be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It'll be an all-day workshop. We're going to go from morning till late afternoon. We will take a break in the middle, have several topics that we'll be talking about, including looking at a radical look at reincarnation and also how we personalize the planets and can use them to impact our daily lives. This will be a fun event, and It's not only open to those people who live in Chicago. You can attend it from anywhere in the world, except it will be 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time until 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And you can find out more information about that by going to friendsofastrology.org. Again, the link is below. Okay, so let's jump right into the astrology of July. I'm recording this on the evening of June 30th, and I actually want to start by taking a quick retrospective, a look back at the Cancer new moon that was on June 28th. And we talked about this quite a bit in last month's forecast and in the mid-month update. And the mid-month update was available to everyone. I should mention just in passing that this month we'll be back to the mid-month update will be only available to patrons. And in order to get the mid-month update, you need to go to Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Rick Levine. And the $3 a month entry level will allow you to get the mid-month update. However, we're going to here today cover a look at the entire month in the entirety. The new moon on June 28th, though, is significant because the new moon at 7 degrees of Cancer was square to Jupiter at 7 degrees of Aries. And there may have been a bit of overextension here that we'll see in a number of ways. But the reason why I just wanted to start off mentioning this is because the new moon in Leo at the end of July will actually be trine to Jupiter rather than square it. That's on July 28th. We'll get there in a moment, but I just wanted you to have a little bit of a memory of the Cancer new moon that was square Jupiter, because we'll call that back up as we move through the month. July is an interesting month because there's a lot of forward motion, and yet there are distinct places in the month where it's like we're not moving as far ahead as fast as it might have felt like we were in June. June was a crazy month at which the speed of things unfolded, with Jupiter having moved into Aries, Chiron in Aries, Mars in Aries. Aries always wanting to push the envelope and to go to what's new without any trepidation of going too far too fast. Aries is always in it, wanting to go new, and to the next place. Now, as we move through July, there are a few things that happen. First of all, Jupiter slows down. At the beginning of the month, Jupiter is at 7.5 degrees, 7.5 degrees of Aries, and actually by the end of the month, on July 28th, Jupiter only moves about 1.25 degrees through the whole month, because it turns retrograde on July 28th. Now, this is important because when planets turn retrograde, they begin to slow down, even the slower moving planets. Last month, we noted that Neptune, which turned retrograde toward the end of the month, actually barely moved 0.5 degree from the middle of May all the way through the coming first week of August. So there's not a lot of movement in the outer planet Neptune, and now with Jupiter turning retrograde, not a lot of movement in Jupiter. But when a planet doesn't move very fast, or when it stands still apparently to turn retrograde or direct, it's like everything revolves around that planet. So we have Neptune and Jupiter being particularly important through July. And with Jupiter slowing down, even in Aries, Jupiter in Aries wants to say yes before it even knows what the offer is. I mean, it's excited and excitable. Jupiter in Aries is ready to go into the new territory, but as it slows down, it becomes a bit more hesitant to just move forward so fast. On top of that, We have Chiron in Aries, and it also is turning retrograde earlier in the month, actually on the 19th. But we have two planets in Aries that are slowing down and turning retrograde. And then we have Mars in Aries, which has been at home in its own sign, really just, I mean, I don't want to say terrorizing, but actually really moving just amazingly quickly, perhaps too fast. And on July 4th, Mars moves into Taurus, where it spends the rest of the month. And in Taurus, Mars becomes very determined, and it doesn't move as fast as it was moving. Well, its speed, its daily speed is not the issue. We don't move as fast because with Mars in Taurus, we're more cautious. We want to make sure we get there. There's a sense of determination that's very, very strong, except there's a bit of a trick here because when Mars moves into Taurus, by the end of the month, actually on the 1st of August, Mars will catch up to Uranus, which has already been some 3.5 years in Taurus. And that Mars conjunction to Uranus at the end of the month, 1st of August, end of July, July 31st, and August 1st, is going to be a very, very powerful end of the month. Just like on July 1st, we're having a very powerful beginning of the month. So that's the lay of the land, just kind of looking at some of the major things through the month. But coming back to July 1st and that new moon in Cancer, that moon in Cancer squares Mars toward the end of Aries. Remember, Mars is getting ready to move into Taurus on July 4th. So the moon moving through the latter degrees of Cancer squares Mars at the latter degrees, 27 degrees of Aries, and opposes Pluto at 27 degrees of Capricorn. And what this means is that Mars is coming into an exact square with Pluto, and that is exact on July 1st. Again, I'm recording this on the evening of June 30th, but we're already feeling this Mars square Pluto. How are we feeling it? Well, it's being felt around the world, but in the United States in particular, we're feeling it because of the political scenarios that are being laid out where Mars, the god of war, the god of assertion, the god of establishing boundaries, Mars, the planet of aggression, is squaring Pluto, the planet of ultimate power. Pluto is the underworld. Pluto is the hidden power. Pluto is the plutocracy, the immense wealth that rules the country or maybe even the world. And Mars square Pluto is basically setting up this battle. The battle lines are being laid out, but it's at the end of the month when Mars in Taurus catches up with Uranus. And in fact, we'll look at this in a little more detail in a little bit, because as Mars catches up with Uranus, the north node of the moon is retrograding back into that Mars-Uranus conjunction, and Mercury will be squaring it from Leo. This is a very, very potent end of July, but it's a very potent beginning. And so what happens in the middle? There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of change, and it might seem like we're on a bit of a ride and we can't get off. We know we're heading somewhere. We're not sure yet where we are heading, because depending upon what your personal beliefs are, depending upon your view of reality, depending upon how much of your view of reality is based upon hopes, dreams, wishes, illusions, fantasy, Neptune, and how much is based upon Saturn, the reality, the history, the facts as they are, will depend, that will largely inform where you fall in this bifurcation of reality that has been occurring for years, but really is aiming toward coming to a head toward the end of this year. In July, we're going to feel it. We're going to feel it more even than we felt it last month in June. But we start the month off with that Mars square Pluto that really sets the battle lines down. I mean, it's like it's laid out and there's no going back. On July 2nd, Mercury becomes active as it trines Saturn and squares Neptune. And this again is a replay of what I'm talking about, because it's trine to Saturn, says trust the facts. Saturn is reality. But Mercury square to Neptune the same day says, but what are the facts? Where am I dreaming? Where am I making this up? And so this whole idea of this Mercury kind of hitting in both directions is very interesting. It's very interesting because we get in the microcosm of July 2nd and even on into the 3rd, we get that microcosm of this much larger scenario that's playing out. Then on July 4th, we have not only Mars moving into Taurus that I mentioned already, but we have Mercury moving from Gemini into Cancer. Now, this is interesting because Mercury has been in Gemini where it's at home, and it's been moving rather quickly, and the information has been flowing rather quickly. And Mercury moving from Gemini into Cancer really slows that flow down. It gives us time to receive it, to contemplate it, to look back over what we thought we knew was true versus what we're now realizing is true. Mercury in Cancer is cautious, it's tentative, and it looks for creating security. And so that's a very different thing than Mercury has been in Gemini, bouncing all over the map. At the same time, Mars, having been in its home sign, moves into Taurus, where also it slows down. It becomes more cautious, more determined. So we might see some of that unfolding around Independence Day in the United States. And interestingly enough, because Mercury and Mars are both changing signs within an hour, within a half an hour of one another. What that means is that as they're changing signs, actually just after they change signs, Mercury forms a sextile with Mars. And this enables communication to occur in a supportive manner that Mercury now, kind of in Cancer, may be able to perceive and to hear and to see things that it wasn't able to before, because Mars is actually demonstrating something in real time. We're able to get it. We're able to understand what's going on. I think July 4th and the 5th actually are interesting because we realize we're on new ground. However, we also realize that it may not be as comfortable as we thought we were. And so that becomes an all-important stuff. And obviously here, although I'm not going to dwell on this because I really want to keep this astrological, in the United States, we're dealing with fallout of these ongoing hearings that have brought a lot of things out in the open that people didn't realize. No matter what your political leanings were, it didn't matter, or it doesn't matter. There are things coming out that are surprising to everyone. At the same time, we've had the Supreme Court of the United States come out with a series of rulings that have taken power away from the federal government, given it to the states, including a reversal on concealed weapons carrying in New York State. That basically the Supreme Court says that states can't jurisdict that. They can't judge that. That's a federal issue. And at the same time, they've basically taken Roe versus Wade, which has legalized abortion, and said, nope, we can't judge that federally. That's a state issue. And they've also weakened the environmental laws and prayer in school. All these things have come up this week from the Supreme Court. And I don't want to dwell on any of these things, although I might be dwelling on them in my own life. The fact of the matter is that these have huge ramifications, and these things, at least in the United States, if not in other parts of the world too, are setting down a scenario for July to play out and build up to this crescendo at the end of the month that actually really builds to another layer of crescendo around Election Day in November. So don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So we're coming back here to July 4th, which is Independence Day in the United States. Easy communication, and then a few days of kind of like, what the heck is going on? There's a bunch of half squares, and the Sun squares Chiron and Mercury squares Jupiter, both of those on July 8th. We may run into like a sense of something's not right. How are we going to deal with this reality? It's not unfolding the way we thought it would. Mercury makes a square and a half with Saturn on July 9th. Again, there's a law laid down or rules that we may have to communicate in order to try to resolve, and yet I don't think things resolve here. By the 10th, however, we do have a shot at breaking through in one way or another, because the Sun makes a sextile with Uranus, and this is an opportunity for original thinking or action, for breaking through, for a moment of awakening or genius. And that Sun is not only sextiling Uranus on the 10th, but by the 12th, it is trining and sextiling the nodal axis, because remember, Uranus, even this early in July, Uranus is very close to the nodes. Uranus moves closer and closer to the nodes and actually conjoins them at the end of the month, but Uranus moves slowly and so do the nodes. And here on July 12th, we actually have on the 12th, we have the Sun making a harmonious aspect to both Uranus and the nodal axis. And I think that this gives us an opportunity to break through the stagnation. In fact, on the 12th, we also have Venus forming a trine with Saturn, which again is stabilizing. Venus is warm and pleasant, and Saturn is cold and sometimes distant. But here we have a balance between what we want and the reality of what we have. And this is leading us right into the full moon on July 13th. The full moon on July 13 happens at 11:37 a.m. at 21 degrees of Cancer. Now, we've had a couple of very powerful lunations over the past month. This one isn't quite as, I don't want to say it's not quite as powerful, but it doesn't have any exact aspects to the lunation itself, to the moon, to the full moon in Capricorn. But the moon in Capricorn is within a few degrees of Pluto. And remember, Pluto's sitting in the backdrop here in Capricorn still. And as the moon comes towards Pluto, we may be aware still of the disintegration or the falling apart of some of the structures that we actually thought were immutable and stable. And so that is there. We also have Mercury coming toward a conjunction with the Sun. The Mercury conjunction to the Sun is not until July 16th, but Mercury is moving very fast right now. In fact, you'll remember that we talked about Mercury moving into Cancer on July 4th. Well, Mercury moves out of Cancer into Leo on July 19th, meaning that Mercury whizzes through Cancer in 2 weeks. It's moving about 2 degrees a day, almost twice as fast as the Sun. And so we really, even though Mercury in Cancer tends to be cautious and receptive, it's also moving fast enough that we have a lot of information coming in that we're doing our best to assimilate. But the full moon on the 13th is actually a tension between how we feel and our sense of safety, our sense of home and family. That would be the Mercury conjunct the Sun in Cancer. And that in some ways is posed against the against the stability of the whole country, of the whole globe, of that moon in Capricorning, wanting structural stability, and yet it's almost like the two of them are at odds with one another. There is a wide square to Chiron, and that square is wide enough that it's not really powerful, but it's there enough to think that we are aware of our limitations, both personally and collectively. And yet, at the same time, during this full moon, we have the sun making that sextile to Uranus. That was exact a couple of days ago. The sun sextile to Uranus was exact on July 10th. But it's still within 3 degrees of orb, which means that the moon is going to be the full moon will be making a trine to Uranus before it makes a conjunction to Pluto later in the day. So this does give us a bit of oomph, and the oomph that it gives us, I believe, is about change. We don't want to change fast because that Cancer sun and Mercury wants to hold on to a sense of security. Also, the moon in Capricorn wants to move cautiously enough that it doesn't lose its firm footing, its stability. But Uranus in here and the nodal axis are both harmonized. They're at that point of Thales, which is trine to one side of an opposition. This is the moon opposing the sun, so that Uranus and the north node are trine to the moon on one side and sextile to the sun on the other, which leads me to believe that there are some breakthroughs in whatever the stresses and stagnation is that we might feel in our individual lives, in our romantic lives, in our personal lives, in our business lives, and globally on a mundane or planetary global level. So I think we're going to begin to see some real movement towards the middle of the month. By the way, on the full moon day, we also we still have that Venus making that trine to Saturn, which is giving us a reality check, but at the same time, Venus is making that square to Neptune. We've seen this issue over and over again through June because Saturn in Aquarius and Neptune in Pisces are pretty close to semi-sextile. That's 30 degrees apart, which means that a planet like Venus at the new moon will be making a smooth, easy trine with Saturn, stabilizing our love, stabilizing our values, creating a sense of conservation of energy when it comes to getting what we want. We can wait. That's what that Venus trine Saturn says. But at the same time, Venus is squaring Neptune, which kind of confuses us and allows the fantasy to power itself up. So again, we have this dilemma that has been with us and continues to be with us. July 14th, 15th, 16th, we have a number of quincunxes here where we have Venus quincunx Pluto and the Sun quincunx Saturn. We have Mercury quincunx Saturn also, because Mercury and the Sun are getting very close together. In fact, they join up. They are exactly conjunct on the 16th. This is a superior conjunction of Mercury to the Sun, meaning that if you drew a straight line from the Earth to the Sun, you'd have to continue and go to the other side of the Sun to get to Mercury. And this means that Mercury is invisible because the Sun is blotting it out. We can't see it. But it also means that Mercury is reaching out into the outer world because it's out beyond the Sun. It's on the other side. And so this is a combination of Mercury and the Sun. It's our will, the Sun. Our consciousness, the Sun, is lined up with our communication, with our ability to talk. And yet, because it's in Mercury, it's just as much an ability to hear, to listen, to actively listen, especially with Jupiter and Chiron still in Aries. We're listening actively. We're engaged, but we're wanting to take information in. By the 17th, we have Mercury now making a trine with Neptune. And in fact, because Mercury and the Sun are still traveling so close together, on the 17th, Mercury makes the trine to Neptune in early morning, like just after midnight. And that's Pacific time. We're always here at Pacific time. And then the Sun makes its trine to Neptune, but not until nearly 4 p.m. But both of them making that trine to Neptune is now encouraging the idealism. It's encouraging the dream. Hopefully we don't go off a deep end thinking that our dream is real, but instead we work toward making that dream real, and realizing, of course, that it's real important, that it's important to keep our feet on the ground. And I think that the idealism that kicks in by the 17th, when we have Mercury and the Sun trining Neptune, I think can give us a place to grab onto. But I hope that we grab onto someplace real, not someplace crazy making, because remember, Neptune is not only dreams and fantasies and hope and faith and wishes about what's going to happen in the future. It's also about delusion and insanity. So we're walking that line. And again, Neptune is still at 25 degrees of Pisces, even though it turned retrograde almost over 2 weeks ago. It's been at 25 degrees Pisces since the middle of May and will remain at 25 degrees of Pisces until the first week of August. And so Neptune is holding a tremendous amount of power because of its apparent immobility. It's apparently holding itself still. Now, on the 17th, Venus also leaves Gemini and moves into Cancer. And so we're getting an additional run of that Cancerian energy now. We have Mercury and the Sun in Cancer, and now Venus in Cancer. Venus likes being in Cancer, but sometimes Venus in Cancer can be difficult because we forget to ask for what we need. We think that someone should just give us what we need because that's the way it works, or because if they loved us, they would know that's what we need. And so we have to be careful with that Venus in Cancer, that we don't go quiet and resentful and pull our energy in and become passively resistant to change just because someone isn't getting us right. We still need to speak our piece. And we absolutely will get our chance as Mercury moves into Leo on the 19th. And so that Mercury moving into Leo, it's, again, Venus moves into Cancer. We're a bit quiet about what we want. Mercury moves into Leo, and we're ready to climb to the top of a mountain to tell people what we know. It's not necessarily about our feelings, though. Mercury in Leo wants to have that command performance because it knows what's right. It knows what's good, and therefore it's willing to put itself on the line and tell everyone. And interestingly enough, that Mercury, as it changes signs from Cancer to Leo, as the Sun will do on the 22nd, they both need to oppose Pluto as they get to the last degrees of Cancer before they move into Leo. So Mercury opposes Pluto on the 18th and then moves into Leo on the 19th. When Mercury opposes Pluto, Mercury stands up to what's in the underworld. It brings it out into the open. Again, we have a tug of war, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's ironic. That's the word. It's ironic that of all the planets, Mercury is the one who can handle Pluto the best, because Mercury in ancient times was considered to be the psychopomp, and the psychopomp was the guide between the realms of Earth and the hell realms, the underworld. And so Mercury has that ability to go into the underworld without losing its identity. Remember, when Persephone was abducted by Hades and taken into the underworld, Jupiter, who couldn't go there because even though he was the king of the gods, he couldn't cross into the underworld. he sent Mercury to be the shuttle diplomat. And so Mercury goes into the underworld and brings things out into the open where they can be dealt with. And I think that this Mercury opposition to Pluto on the 18th, and then Mercury moving into Leo, is like Mercury finds stuff out in the underworld where it's been, now comes out into the open and says, here's what I know. And once it does that, we have to deal with what we know, because once the light shines on something, we can't any longer pretend that it's not there. Then on the 19th, also, Chiron is stationary, so we may be licking our wounds. We may be looking backward and thinking, where did we go wrong? Or something happened in the past that was very hurtful that we haven't dealt with. There's a need through this whole process to forgive and also to be forgiven. To forgive ourselves for anything that we've done, but also to allow that same for other people. And this 19th is a very, very powerful period of time, because later in the day, the sun comes into that same opposition with Pluto that Mercury had on the 18th. Now on the 19th, the sun opposes Pluto. And when the sun opposes Pluto, again, it's that light shining into the darkness. And there's this tug of war between, maybe it's light and dark or good and evil, but it'll be obvious. We'll be able to see it here. And then on the 20th and on into the 21st, we have a number of half squares that are, again, anxious. They're annoying. They're problematic, but they don't necessarily have a solution built into them. We have Mars forming a half square with Neptune, where we're acting in a manner that's not consistent with where we want to go, as crazy as that sounds. We have Venus making a half square with Uranus, and there we're maybe pushing boundaries more than we need to, or more than we would like to. And we have Jupiter making a half square with Saturn on the 21st. Now, this is really the important one of them, and this is the first of 3 half squares that Jupiter will make with Saturn. I might have said Uranus. Jupiter making a half square with Saturn. Now, remember, we had that grand mutation conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn back around Christmas of 2020. This is the first hard aspect between the seeds that were planted then, between expansive Jupiter, opportunistic, growth-oriented Jupiter, and contractive, frightened, fearful, and holding on to the past Saturn. Saturn that wants to grow at a rate that is stable, Jupiter that wants to grow at a rate that may be unstable, too much, too fast. So I think this period of time, really from the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, even the 21st, when that Jupiter-Saturn semi-square is exact, all the way to the 22nd, when the sun goes into Leo. Now remember, Mercury is already in Leo, and when the sun enters Leo, it's like we want more things out in the open. We want to say things or act as if we know that you know what we know, as if I know what you know. There's that sense of kind of magnanimity, of drama, of Leo wanting to somehow take charge and take stage and act in a way that is maybe more godlike or grand-like or magnanimous is the word that comes to mind than actually we may have been in the past. So this July 22nd, I think, is a very important period of time. And on top of that, Mercury, now having reached 8 degrees of Leo, is forming a trine with Jupiter. Now here we're going to go back to that new moon on June 28th that I started out with, because I pointed out that the new moon was square to Jupiter, and a sun and moon square Jupiter. Jupiter is inflating things, and we may be going too much, too far, too fast, too quick. There's that sense of overconfidence. There's a sense of feeling like we may be being dragged somewhere way too fast, and we just need to slow things down. But it's easy to go overboard in action or reaction. Now, with Mercury trining Jupiter, we're granted the opportunity to express things more clearly in a way that is actually opening and teaching and creating more awareness. That's Mercury to Jupiter. And that, in fact, is occurring while the sun is moving into Leo. And so it really is a double whammy of external expression. Also, while we're still on the 23rd, let's just take a quick look at that moon, which over the couple of days prior, the moon has moved through Taurus. And on the 21st and 22nd, the moon moving through Taurus joined up with Mars and Uranus and the North Node. And note how close. Mars is now only 7 degrees away from Uranus, and the North Node is backing toward Uranus, and it's only 1.5 degrees away. But the moon kind of just comes through there. And I think on July 21st, we get a little bit of a sense of what may unfold at the end of the month when that Mars actually catches up with Uranus, Mars moving direct, and the North Node retrograde into Uranus all at the same time. And remember that Mercury, which has moved into Leo, by the end of the month, it will be squaring all of that. We'll see that unfold. But that's where this month builds to. It builds to a definite, thunderous crescendo. And it's like it's like we've been cooking a stew. And as the stew begins to thicken and get closer to ready to eat it, it's like if we turn the heat up too much, or if we forget to keep stirring, it sticks to the bottom. And once it sticks to the bottom, we're in trouble, because that stuff that sticks to the bottom, it's the energy that's stagnant, the energy that doesn't move. That's what will explode. And when I say explode, I don't necessarily mean physically. It certainly can be that, but explode metaphysically. That's what makes that sudden change that I think is going to occur toward the end of July, beginning of August. So let's move on now to the 24th. As we're coming back to, there's the moon moving through Gemini, and by the 24th, we now have Venus moving toward that 8 degrees of Cancer, where Venus makes a square with Jupiter. And this is about potential overindulgence again. This is about maybe even because Venus and Jupiter are the lesser, Venus and Jupiter greater, they're the lesser and greater benefics in traditional astrology. It's really easy to fall into their influence, because often when we fall into their influence, it works out okay. However, when we do, we can overeat, we can overdrink, we can over-exercise, we can overplay, we can overindulge, we can overextend ourselves, whether we're playing a game of chess or whether we're playing a game of international political strategy. It's easy when that Venus squares Jupiter to take a step too far. Now remember, we've already been set up by Mercury trining Jupiter, so we know what's possible. In fact, we know that anything's possible. On the 26th, Mars comes into being squared, actually Mercury moving faster. Mercury reaches that 13-degree point. Actually, it's 14 degrees by the time it does it on the 26th. And Mercury squares Mars. Now, note how close that Mars is to Uranus. It's already within 4 degrees of orb, and Uranus is within 1 degree, or just barely 1 degree to the node. And so we see this coming together, and yet we also see that Mercury making that square. And remember, Mercury communication, Mars passion, aggression, assertion, boundary setting. We can overstate our boundaries here. And especially with Uranus, things can happen so fast here that things get out of control on that July 24th, 25th, 26th. It's like it's steamrolling or maybe rocket shipping, because a steamroller moves slowly. This is moving very, very fast, and it's moving toward that new moon in Leo. And the new moon in Leo is at 10:55 a.m. on the 28th. And and that new moon in Leo is at 5 degrees, about 5 degrees 40 minutes of Leo, about 5 2/3 of a degree of Leo. And this is incredibly important because Jupiter's back in the picture. Remember, when a lunation, when a moon or the sun or the moon at the time of a new moon or full moon make an aspect to another planet, that defines the flavor of that lunation. And now we have a new moon in overamping, expressive Leo, in action-oriented Leo, in a Leo that when it comes from the heart is acting in a manner that is coming from a place of love. That's what Leo is about. It's the heart. And so that moon in Leo, the new moon in Leo, is trine to Jupiter in Aries. It's about 3 degrees of orb, but it's applying, which means that the moon will catch up and make that exact trine in about 6 hours, within about 6 hours of the new moon itself. And then the sun will make that exact same trine in about 3 days. It actually does it on the afternoon of July 31st. We'll get there in just a moment. Meanwhile, we also have Mercury, which has squared Uranus. Remember, it squared Mars back on the 26th. But now on the 28th, that Mercury at 18 degrees of Leo is squaring Uranus. And this electrifies our words, but our words may not be saying exactly what we want them to say, because our thoughts and our ideas are moving so quickly. We can be jumping to wrong conclusions, or we can be making an incredible breakthrough. Why do I say that? Because there are these trines to Jupiter, and Mercury is also making Mercury is also making a trine to Chiron. Now that happens back a couple days prior. Do I see where that is? Mercury makes the trine to Jupiter on the 23rd, and it actually makes the trine to Chiron on the 27th. So we're able to communicate here. But what happens is that by the 28th, by that new moon, it's like our words can get so tangled up in our anger and our aggression. We can be so pissed off that we end up saying too much or saying things that are inflammatory. And here's the danger of all of this, because you'll notice that that new moon in Leo wants to express. And it does, because it's trine Jupiter. However, over the next couple of days, that Mars is coming closer and closer to Uranus. And remember, the beginning of the month, we had Mars square Pluto, which was about power struggle, but it was undercover. It was in front of us, but we didn't see it all, but we knew it was unfolding. Now, with Uranus being tapped by assertive and even conflictive warlike Mars, there's that sense that things can actually get very hot very fast. And when I say very hot, I mean explosive. And again, I have to be careful here, because this doesn't necessarily mean physically explosive. It is in Taurus, but there can be monetary pieces here. Something can come to light that has to do with the flow of money that we learn that we didn't know before, that changes the ball game. Whether it's someone that we know that's been taking money from us and we didn't know it, a worker situation, or whether, again, when we go back to politics, whether there has been an abuse of use of money. The reason why I'm leaning on money here is because we have the North Node and Mars and Uranus all in Taurus, and Taurus is the sign of what we value. It can be our values but it also can be things that are valuable. And of course, money fits right into that. So on the 28th, Mercury squares Uranus and it squares the nodal axis. And at the same time, we have that Mercury also coming into an opposition with Saturn that's not exact until another couple of days. It's exact on the 30th. And so here, when Mercury is opposing Saturn from Leo, we also have the moon still from the new moon in Leo. The moon is still in Leo. And on the 29th, the moon actually lines up with Mercury and then opposes Saturn. And this may be a little bit of disclosure, or foreshadowing is the word I was looking for, for what actually occurs when Mercury actually opposes Saturn on the 30th. Now, on the 30th, it's late in the day. It's almost midnight when Mercury actually reaches the opposition to Saturn. This is a Sunday, so we can expect maybe the news not to hit till Monday, although that maybe isn't true anymore. But that is the 31st is actually the 31st is actually a Sunday. And on the 31st, we not only have Mercury opposing Saturn, that's fixed ideas, fixed thoughts running into a reality check, and something has to give, but it's also still widely squaring that Mars-Uranus node, even though Mercury is outrunning it pretty quickly. That's still all there. So we have kind of this T-square energy that's still aiming at the Mars-Uranus, even though it's not exact until August 1st. Boy, we're actually feeling it on the 31st as the moon has already whizzed through there, and now Mercury is also pulling that opposition to Saturn, and on the same day we have that's the exact day of Uranus lining up with at 18 degrees to the node. Something happening here is much deeper. It's in an evolutionary cycle that's not just about what's happening on the surface. Remember, nodes are often like wormholes that pull into the past and the future, kind of like vortexes, if you will. And angry Mars is pissed off, although it's holding itself back a little bit, hopefully, because it's in Taurus and it knows where it's going and it wants to get there. It doesn't want to blow everything up too soon because it wants to be as effective as it can. But we also have here on the 31st that Venus squaring to Chiron. This doesn't necessarily feel good. Mercury is forming a square and a half to Jupiter. What's gone too much, too far, too fast? And into all of this, we have the sun that on 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, if the sun actually makes that exact trine to Jupiter. We've been feeling it for, a days, and we'll still feel it for a day or two, but I'm going to move this now to August 1st, and we can see that on August 1st, Mars at 18 degrees of Taurus, the north node of the moon, 18 degrees of Taurus, and Uranus at 18 degrees of Taurus. And by midday, the Mars is conjuncted the node of the moon, and by the end of the day, Mars is already past it. This is a Tuesday, August 2nd, but August 1st, August 2nd, powerful, powerful days. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. As I kind of alluded to at the beginning or earlier on, it's like a stew that's getting stirred, and we have to be so careful that we don't let things stick, because the things that stick are the things that are going to explode one way or another. And on top of that, this is all just a kind of a turning point that will eventually lead us, in the United States at least, to November election day, when everything can change, and yet it's way too early to predict how things are going to change. It's just they will change. And so it's a very, very powerful month. It's like a deeper energy than June. It's like things are heating up, and ultimately it's like there's no escape. It's like we are on what's felt like a roller coaster now may feel like a deep dive. But we're going to complete this one way or another, and we can't stop it until we actually see this thing all the way through resolution. That's it. It's an exciting period of time. I'll have certainly more to say about where we seem to be going in the mid-month update, in the July mid-month update. And so for those of you who are on Patreon subscribers, you will get that. And the rest of you, I hope to see some of you. Mark your calendars, either for the ESAR conference, the end of August, in Westminster, that's between Boulder and Denver, Colorado, or Lilydale in New York, and I hope to see you, many of you, there. And until then, I think more than ever, we need to think as cosmically as we can, because we can't get stuck in whatever the minutia is. And yet, while we're thinking cosmically, we have to act locally. What we do locally, it's been said, all politics are local politics. What we do locally determines what will happen nationally, internationally, globally, more than ever. Think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine.